In the quiet stillness of history, there emerges a figure whose presence reshaped the world with neither wealth nor armies, but with truth, compassion, and unwavering dedication to a divine message. From the deserts of Arabia came a man named Muhammad, born in the city of Makkah, whose legacy would echo across continents and through centuries. His life was not marked by worldly luxury or ease, but rather by humility, trials, and a love for humanity so deep that even in the face of cruelty, he responded with mercy. He walked gently on the earth, speaking not to dominate, but to guide with wisdom drawn from the Creator. Before the first revelation descended, he was already known among his people as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. He had no crown upon his head, no riches to command respect, and yet people sought his counsel, comforted by his sincerity and the calm strength in his gaze. He lived simply, choosing modesty in dress, food, and shelter, finding richness in character rather than in gold or silver. The sincerity of his smile, the warmth of his manner, and the integrity of his word left a lasting impression on those who knew him. His mission began in solitude as he withdrew to the cave of Hira, seeking answers in silence. There, in a moment forever etched in spiritual history, he received the first words of divine revelation. He trembled not out of fear for himself, but out of awe for the weight of what he had been entrusted with. From that moment on, he carried within him a light meant to illuminate the hearts of all who would listen. That light was not harsh or blinding. It was gentle, like the rising of the moon over a darkened valley, softly revealing what had been hidden. The world he was born into was one of tribal feuds, injustice, and idolatry. Yet, he never raised his voice in anger for his own sake, and when faced with rejection or insult, he bore it with patience that flowed like a quiet stream, steady and enduring. Even those who opposed him were often left stunned by his dignity and restraint. He taught that strength lay not in overpowering others, but in mastering oneself, that the highest among people were those with the purest hearts, and that every human soul was worthy of respect. In his eyes, there was tenderness for the orphan, hope for the outcast, and dignity for the enslaved. He stood in defense of the weak, gave freely to those in need, and forgave those who wronged him with a grace that disarmed the hardest of hearts. His was a message not only of faith, but of deep, abiding love. For his family, for his companions, and for generations he had never seen but still prayed for. He was a man whose words were few, but full of meaning, whose silence was thoughtful, whose every step carried purpose. Through him, the values of justice, mercy, and truth were woven into the fabric of human conscience. His story is not just one of miracles and milestones, but of the quiet nobility that comes from walking in the light of faith. The traces of his life remain not in monuments of stone, but in the hearts of those who remember him with reverence. And so begins a journey, not of noise or spectacle, but of reflection and remembrance, where each step leads closer to understanding the man who was chosen to carry the final message, not with pride, but with peace. Long before the world would come to know him as the final messenger, the last prophet, Muhammad was born into a world of shifting sands and ancient traditions. It was the year 570 of the Common Era, a time remembered by the people of Makkah as the Year of the Elephant, named after the failed invasion of the Holy City by an Abyssinian army led by Abraha. This event, marked by divine protection of the Kaaba, set the stage for a life that would one day be filled with divine purpose. In that very year, amidst the mountains and valleys of Makkah, a child was born into the noble clan of Banu Hashim, a respected branch of the Quraysh tribe. His father, Abdullah, was a man of integrity and good standing, but fate would write his absence into the first pages of his son's life. While still in the womb of his mother, Amina, Muhammad lost his father, who passed away on a trade journey to Yathrib, later to be known as Medina. Thus, the prophet entered this world as an orphan, before he could even open his eyes to see it. Amina, his mother, was known for her graceful spirit and calm demeanor. She raised her son with tenderness and care, seeing in him a quiet strength even as an infant. But her time with him would also be fleeting. When Muhammad was just 6 years old, while returning from a visit to his father's grave in Yathrib, Amina fell ill on the journey and passed away in a small village called Abwa, leaving the young boy to face the world once more without the comfort of his parents. In the wake of this second loss, Muhammad came under the guardianship of his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, a man revered in Makkah for his leadership and generosity. Though already aged, Abdul Muttalib treated his grandson with a special affection, keeping him close and showing him a love that softened the weight of early sorrow. The young boy would often be seen sitting beside his grandfather near the Kaaba, observing the ways of the elders, listening quietly to conversations, and taking in the bustling life of the city. But again, time would test him. Just 2 years later, Abdul Muttalib also passed away, and guardianship of Muhammad passed to his uncle Abu Talib. Abu Talib, though not a wealthy man, was rich in heart and loyalty. He cared for Muhammad as if he were his own son, and under his care the boy grew into a youth marked by quiet reflection, keen observation, and impeccable conduct. As he grew older, he joined his uncle on trade caravans that crossed the deserts to Syria and other parts of the region. These journeys were not only opportunities for business, but also for learning. Muhammad observed the different peoples, cultures, and customs, but always remained grounded in the values of truthfulness, modesty, and compassion. It was during these years that his character began to shine with increasing brilliance. He never partook in the common vices of his society. While many young men of his age spent their time in merriment, indulging in drink and song, Muhammad chose a life of simplicity and restraint. He was often found in solitude, contemplating the meaning of life and the injustices he saw around him. The society in which he lived was deeply tribal and stratified. The poor were oppressed, women were treated as property, and infanticide was a tragic norm. Idolatry was widespread, with hundreds of idols placed in and around the Kaaba. Yet in the midst of this, Muhammad stood apart, untouched by these practices, guided by a natural purity that others came to admire. He became known for his honesty and trustworthiness. Merchants and townspeople alike would entrust him with their goods, confident in his integrity. His word was never doubted, and his demeanor inspired trust. People began calling him Al-Amin, the trustworthy, an honor that would follow him long before his prophethood and remain a core part of his legacy. In a city driven by commerce and tribal alliances, such a reputation was rare and deeply respected. He never lied, never deceived, and never took advantage of another, even when he could have done so without consequence. In his 20s, Muhammad began to attract the attention of Khadija, a wealthy and noble businesswoman in Makkah. Impressed by his honesty, work ethic, and reputation, she offered him the opportunity to manage her trade affairs. He accepted, and with the same integrity that had defined his youth, he led her caravans with exceptional skill. On one such journey, her servant, who accompanied Muhammad, returned to Khadija with glowing reports, not just of Prophet but of Muhammad's conduct, his fairness, his modesty, and his sincerity. Moved by what she heard, Khadija proposed marriage through a trusted intermediary. Though she was 15 years his senior, the bond between them was strong and immediate. They married, and their union was filled with love, mutual respect, and unwavering support. Their marriage marked the beginning of a period of peace and stability in Muhammad's life. With Khadija, he found not only a partner in household matters, but a confidant and a pillar of strength who would later play a crucial role when the first revelations descended. During these years, he continued to live modestly despite the wealth Khadija brought into the home. He helped with household tasks, mended his own clothes, and treated others with gentleness regardless of their status. Even in these days of relative comfort, Muhammad's heart remained troubled by the state of society. The false gods, the suffering of the poor, the corruption of the leaders, all these weighed heavily on him. He longed for something more, a deeper truth, a light to cut through the darkness he saw engulfing his people. Often, he would retreat to the cave of Hira, nestled in the mountains just outside of Makkah. There, in the quiet solitude of the cave, surrounded by stone and sky, he would reflect, pray in the way of Abraham, and ponder the mysteries of life and the presence of the divine. It was a life shaped by sorrow and love, hardship and grace. From orphaned child to beloved husband, from quiet observer to a man of unwavering principle, Muhammad's early life set the foundation for the extraordinary mission that awaited him. He did not seek power or recognition. He sought truth. And even before revelation came, that quest for truth already flowed through his every word and action. Like a stream carving its gentle way through a desert, patient but unstoppable. From the earliest moments of his life, those around Muhammad recognized a presence that was both gentle and profound. He was not loud, nor did he demand attention, yet his presence commanded deep respect. There was something in the stillness of his manner, in the sincerity of his eyes, in the measured grace of his actions, that drew people near with a sense of comfort and trust. His character was not forged in privilege or ease, but shaped by hardship, reflection, and a quiet strength that never wavered. He was known not for elaborate speeches or boastful claims, but for the silent eloquence of his behavior. In a world often ruled by pride and competition, he chose humility. In a society where strength was measured by dominance, he revealed a new strength, one rooted in self-restraint, forgiveness, and love. Throughout his life, he embodied truthfulness. His word was his bond. Even his enemies, those who opposed his message and sought to silence him, never dared to accuse him of lying. His honesty was so deeply rooted in his nature that people entrusted him with their valuables, confident that he would guard them as if they were his own. This integrity became a cornerstone of his being, not out of calculation or reputation, but because his heart simply could not bear deceit. He lived in harmony with his conscience, never compromising his principles for gain, never bending his ethics for favor. He was the same in private as he was in public, consistent in his truth, unwavering in his values. What made his character even more radiant was his compassion. He had a heart that opened wide for everyone, the poor, the traveler, the widow, the orphan, even the animals that walked the earth and the birds that flew above. He treated all creatures with tenderness, never raising his voice in anger without cause, never striking out in rage. If a child interrupted his prayer, he would shorten it out of mercy. If a beggar approached him, he would give even when he had little. He greeted the elderly with honor, embraced children with affection, and never allowed arrogance to find a home within him. His humility was sincere, not performed. He sat among his companions as one of them. He ate what they ate, he dressed modestly, walked humbly, and rejected all signs of pride or self-importance. Those who were closest to him would often marvel at how he served others with his own hands. He would mend his clothes, patch his sandals, and help with the chores at home. He never demanded service from others. When food was placed before him, he never criticized it. If he liked it, he ate it. If not, he simply left it without complaint. He ate slowly, never overeating, and always expressed gratitude for whatever was provided. In conversation, he never interrupted. He listened with full attention, turning his whole body toward the one who spoke, giving them the feeling that they were seen, heard, and valued. There was a profound gentleness in his speech. He never mocked or ridiculed. He never shamed others, even when they were in the wrong. When someone made a mistake, he corrected them in the most graceful way, preserving their dignity and allowing them a path to redemption without embarrassment. His words were purposeful, never excessive, and always coated with wisdom. He avoided sarcasm and gossip, and whenever he had to speak firmly, he did so with justice, never cruelty. His laughter was soft, never uproarious, and his tears flowed easily, especially when praying for his people or remembering the blessings of God. He possessed extraordinary patience. Life did not spare him from sorrow or injustice, yet he endured each trial with unwavering trust. He was mocked, boycotted, threatened, and attacked. He lost his beloved wife, his children, his closest companions. Yet in all of this, he never allowed bitterness to take root in his heart. He forgave when most would seek revenge. He prayed for those who hurt him. When he returned to Makkah after years of exile, standing victorious before those who once sought his death, he did not seek punishment. Instead, he asked them, "What do you think I will do to you?" And when they replied with fear, he said, "Go. You are free." That moment, more than any conquest, revealed the depth of his nobility. His sense of justice was equally unmatched. He stood against oppression in every form, regardless of who the oppressor was. He taught that the weak and the strong were equal before the law, that the poor deserved the same dignity as the rich. He reminded his followers that true greatness was not in lineage or wealth, but in righteousness. He lived what he preached. He never accumulated riches. If wealth came to him, he gave it away by nightfall. He did not store for himself treasures, but sought treasure in the hearts of people, through kindness, service, and truth. There was also beauty in the way he connected with those around him. He knew people by name. He remembered their stories. He smiled often, and when he did, it came from the depths of his soul. It was said that no one felt invisible in his presence. Even those who felt insignificant in society found worth when standing beside him. He saw potential where others saw failure. He offered hope where others delivered judgment. And he never allowed fame, influence, or power to cloud his vision or dim the light of sincerity within him. Animals, too, felt the mercy in his touch. Once, seeing a camel groaning from exhaustion and mistreatment, he approached it gently and comforted it, rebuking its owner for cruelty. In another moment, he changed the path of an army because he saw a mother bird panicking for her chicks. He taught that mercy to animals was part of faith, and that every living thing had rights. His love was not selective. It poured freely and abundantly, like rain nourishing a thirsty earth. The more one looked at him, the more one found themselves drawn to emulate him. Not because he demanded it, but because his way invited the soul to become better. He was a mirror of the highest human potential, what it means to walk humbly with purpose, to love deeply with courage, to live sincerely without pretension. Even in moments of silence, his presence taught. Even in the smallest gestures, he offered lessons. In his character, the world found a model not built on power, but on purity, not born of fear, but of love. He was not just a man of words, but of deep, consistent action. Every moment of his life revealed a layer of virtue. Every day, another step on the path of moral excellence. Those who met him never forgot him, and those who heard of him found their hearts moved even centuries later. His character was the living proof of the message he carried. And through him, the world came to know that beauty, when rooted in truth and guided by mercy, has the power to change everything. In the stillness of the Arabian night, beneath a canopy of stars that stretched endlessly across the heavens, a man sat alone in the quiet sanctuary of a cave. The world below him bustled with trade, politics, and tribal rivalries, but here in the cave of Hira, high in the hills that cradled the city of Makkah, there was only silence. It was the kind of silence that invites reflection, that opens the heart to something greater than itself. This man, Muhammad, had made it his practice to retreat from society for days at a time, seeking not solitude for its own sake, but a nearness to something vast and sacred, something that pulsed just beneath the surface of reality, waiting to be known. He was no stranger to sorrow or reflection. The weight of injustice, idolatry, and human suffering pressed heavily on his soul. He saw people bowing to stone idols, offering sacrifices to objects their own hands had shaped, and his heart trembled at the emptiness of it all. He watched as the strong exploited the weak, as the wealthy ignored the cries of the hungry, and as tribal arrogance crushed mercy and humility beneath its heel. But he did not raise his voice in protest. Not yet. He waited. He searched. He prayed in silence, his hands raised not to an image, but to the invisible Creator, whom his heart recognized even if his tongue had not yet been given the words. Each visit to the cave was a search for clarity. He would carry food and water with him and stay for days, wrapped in contemplation, gazing over the valley below. The wind would pass gently through the rocks, carrying with it the scent of earth and sky. The night would fall, and stars would appear one by one like divine lanterns, each whispering secrets to those who listened with the soul. It was in one of these sacred nights, in the month of Ramadan, that everything changed. In that moment, when the heavens chose to speak again after centuries of silence, the cave was no longer still. Without warning, the silence broke. A presence filled the space, unseen but undeniably real. The air itself seemed to tremble. A voice, powerful and overwhelming, surrounded him. It was not like any sound he had ever known. It did not simply enter his ears, it echoed in his very being. The voice said, "Read." Startled, confused, and overcome with fear, Muhammad responded with trembling honesty, "I do not know how to read." Again the voice came, firm and insistent, "Read." His heart pounded as the presence enveloped him, neither cruel nor gentle, but absolute. Again he pleaded, "I do not know how to read." And once more the voice commanded, "Read, in the name of your Lord who created." In that instant, something immense passed through him. The words were imprinted not just in his mind, but in the very marrow of his bones. The trembling of his body could not be calmed, for he had encountered something unlike anything this world could offer. The angel who stood before him was none other than Jibril, the same messenger who had come to prophets before him. But to Muhammad, who had never imagined such a destiny, the encounter was overwhelming. The experience did not begin with certainty or ease, but with awe, fear, and the trembling humility of a heart awakened by the voice of heaven. He rushed down from the cave, his body shaking, his breath short, his soul still reverberating with the echo of divine command. The stones beneath his feet barely registered as he descended the mountain, seeking comfort, seeking explanation, seeking the only person who could calm his stormed heart. When he reached his home, he went straight to his beloved wife, Khadijah. In her embrace, he found the warmth and steadiness that he so desperately needed. He said to her, cover me," and she wrapped him in a cloak, holding him close as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Through choked breath and wide eyes, he told her everything. He described the cave, the voice, the command to read, and the fear that perhaps something terrible had happened to him. But Khadijah, ever calm, ever wise, did not respond with disbelief or doubt. She saw the light in him long before the world did, and her faith in his goodness was unwavering. She reassured him, reminding him of his character, his honesty, his care for the poor, and his loyalty to truth. She told him that God would never humiliate someone like him. Seeking further confirmation, she took him to her cousin, Waraka ibn Nawfal, a learned man who had studied the scriptures of previous prophets. When he heard Muhammad's account, Waraka's eyes filled with tears. He recognized the signs. He knew the angel who had come to Moses had now come again. He told Muhammad that this was the beginning of a mission, one that would bring revelation to a world that had long been lost in darkness. But he also warned him that the path ahead would not be easy, for every prophet who brought truth had been met with resistance. In the days that followed, the silence returned. The cave was quiet once more. The angel did not appear again for a time, and Muhammad felt the weight of that absence deeply. Doubts began to whisper in his mind. Had it all been real? Had he imagined it? But then the presence returned, not with wrath or condemnation, but with reassurance. New verses came, guiding him gently into the role he had been chosen to fulfill. The words were clear and powerful, unlike anything the poets of Makkah had ever heard. They flowed not from human skill, but from a source higher than the sky and deeper than the soul. The revelation did not come all at once. It would unfold over 23 years, each portion revealed in response to moments, questions, and events. The words came not merely as commands, but as light. Light that healed, guided, warned, and uplifted. The Quran became the living heart of his mission, a voice that sang of mercy, justice, and remembrance. Through it, the forgotten were honored, the arrogant were humbled, and the path to the divine was illuminated for all who sought it. Yet Muhammad never allowed pride to take root in his heart. Though chosen by the Creator, he remained humble, his eyes filled with tears when he prayed, his voice soft when he recited the verses, his footsteps steady as he carried the weight of the message. Revelation transformed him, not into someone detached from humanity, but into someone more deeply connected to it than ever before. He became the bridge between heaven and earth, not through grandeur, but through service. He never claimed to be more than a man, only a messenger, a servant, a bearer of words not his own, but entrusted to him for the sake of all. The night of revelation was the beginning of a new era, not just for Makkah or for Arabia, but for all of humankind. It was the moment when the veil between the seen and unseen was lifted, when divine mercy flowed once again upon a world in need. And at the center of it stood a man who neither sought the burden nor fled from it, but who embraced it with trembling hands and a heart full of trust. The cave of Hira became sacred not because of its stones, but because it bore witness to the first heartbeat of a revelation that would echo forever. In the rhythm of daily life, in the quiet moments between revelation and struggle, there was a space where Prophet Muhammad found rest, not in palaces or retreats, but in the embrace of family. His family life was marked by tenderness, loyalty, and profound respect. It was a part of his existence where his humanity became visible in the simplest of ways, through shared meals, gentle words, and the soft laughter of children echoing in the home. Despite the weight of his mission, he never allowed its burden to separate him from the ones he loved. In fact, the way he treated his family became another form of dawah, a living message of what it meant to lead with mercy and walk in humility. At the heart of his family life was Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the first person to believe in his prophethood and the one who knew him best. Before the world recognized his station, she knew his worth. Before the angel spoke to him, she had seen the signs of his greatness in the way he treated people and honored truth. Their relationship began not with drama or wealth, but with trust. She had hired him to manage her trading caravans, and he returned not just with profit, but with a reputation even more sterling than before. The reports she received from her servant who accompanied him were full of praise for his fairness, his honesty, and his gentle conduct. Moved by what she heard, Khadija proposed marriage, and he accepted. At the time, she was 40 and he was 25. Yet never once did he express concern about her age or her previous marriages. What mattered to him was the nobility of her soul, and what mattered to her was the purity of his heart. Their marriage was one of unwavering companionship. She supported him emotionally, financially, and spiritually. When he first received revelation and returned home shaken, it was Khadija who calmed him, wrapped him in a cloak, and reminded him that a man of his character could never be forsaken by God. Her words became a balm to his soul, and her presence was a constant comfort. For the entirety of their marriage, he took no other wife. She was his only partner, his beloved, his closest confidant. Their home was modest, but it was filled with peace. The prophet often helped with chores, swept the floor, mended his own clothes, and played with his children. There was no sense of superiority or hierarchy, only love and shared responsibility. Together, they had several children. Their sons, Qasim and Abdullah, passed away in infancy, leaving the prophet with a sorrow that lingered quietly in his heart. Their daughters, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima, grew up under the warmth of their parents' care. The prophet loved his daughters deeply, treating them with kindness and respect that defied the cultural norms of the time. In a society that often devalued daughters, he would stand up when his daughter Fatima entered the room, kiss her forehead, and seat her beside him. His affection for her was so great that she became known as the one who resembled him most in character and demeanor. She shared his softness, his devotion, and his patience. The bond between father and daughter was unbreakable, rooted in love and spiritual kinship. Fatima eventually married Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's cousin and a man of deep faith and loyalty. Their union was simple, marked not by grand celebration, but by mutual respect and piety. The Prophet supported them, not with wealth, but with prayers and encouragement. From this marriage came Hassan and Hussein, his grandsons, whom he adored beyond measure. He would carry them on his shoulders, let them climb on his back during prayer, and remind his followers that they were the leaders of the youth of paradise. His love for them was visible, unhidden, and pure. They were not just grandchildren, they were pieces of his heart. After the passing of Khadijah, a sorrow settled over him. He mourned her deeply, for she had been his fortress of peace during the stormiest of days. Even years later, he would speak of her with love, often remembering the small acts of kindness she had shown. He would send gifts to her friends, speak gently of her memory, and become emotional at the mention of her name. Her absence was not a wound that faded. It became a sacred space in his heart, honored and protected. When others asked about her, his eyes would soften and his voice would lower, carrying the tenderness of a man who had loved deeply and lost. In the years that followed, the Prophet entered into other marriages, each for reasons that extended beyond personal desire. Some were to protect widows, others to strengthen community ties, and a few were based on divine instruction. But in each case, he upheld the highest standard of fairness and respect. He never favored one wife unjustly over another. He was emotionally available, kind in speech, and gentle in his dealings. His wives spoke of his patience, his attentiveness, and his humility. He consulted them, shared meals with them, and listened to their concerns with genuine interest. One of his wives, Aisha, was known for her sharp intellect and spirited nature. She became a scholar in her own right, narrating hundreds of hadiths that would shape Islamic thought for generations. Their relationship was filled with playful moments and deep conversations, revealing that love could be both lighthearted and profound. Even in matters of discipline and conflict, the Prophet demonstrated a remarkable ability to maintain peace. When disagreements arose among family members, he never resorted to anger or harshness. He corrected gently, praised often, and always left room for forgiveness. His home was a place of learning, warmth, and mutual respect. No voice was silenced, no opinion dismissed. Everyone had their place at his table, and everyone felt seen. He extended this familial love beyond the immediate bounds of household. He cared for the poor as though they were his own kin. He adopted Zayd ibn Haritha and raised him with the same love and care he gave his biological children. When Zayd's father eventually found him and offered to take him back, Zayd chose to remain with the Prophet, not out of obligation, but from love. He later married Zainab bint Jahsh by divine command, a union that carried social lessons for the community and affirmed the Prophet's role as a reformer of deep-seated traditions. His treatment of women within his family stood as a quiet revolution in a time when women were often silenced or mistreated. He taught that the best among men were those who were best to their families. He modeled what it meant to honor one's wife, to cherish one's daughters, and to lead not with dominance, but with gentleness. The harmony in his household was not accidental. It was the fruit of conscious effort, daily acts of kindness, and the constant presence of sincere love. His family life was not separate from his mission. It was the soil in which that mission was nurtured. It showed that a prophetic life did not require withdrawal from human relationships, but rather the deepening of them. He showed that one could be both a leader to nations and a father who knelt to tie a child's sandal. He reminded the world that greatness is not only found in the public eye, but in how one speaks at home, how one listens, how one forgives. His family life was a mirror of his message, a sanctuary of peace in a world still learning how to love. Compassion flowed through every fiber of the Prophet Muhammad's being. It was not a trait he wore only in public or reserved for moments of inspiration. It was the very essence of his nature. In every encounter, in every decision, in every reaction, mercy was his guide. Those who met him felt its warmth before they even heard his voice. He did not need to declare it, for it revealed itself in the way he walked, the way he smiled, the way he listened. His mercy was not conditional, not limited to the deserving, nor did it depend on recognition or reward. It was extended to all, friend and foe, believer and disbeliever, human and animal alike. When he walked through the streets of Makkah or Medina, he did not turn his face away from the poor, nor did he walk faster to avoid the burdens of others. If a child called him, he stopped. If a stranger asked for help, he listened. He gave without hesitation, even when he himself had little. He shared his food, his time, his counsel. But more than that, he shared his heart. He never allowed status or position to cloud his treatment of others. A slave was shown the same respect as a nobleman. A sinner received the same compassion as a worshiper. It was not about what people had done, but what they could become. He saw beyond their mistakes and failures to the goodness that still flickered within. One of the most striking examples of his mercy was in his ability to forgive. He was wronged time and again, mocked, rejected, physically attacked, and betrayed, yet he did not allow bitterness to take root in his soul. When the people of Taif rejected him with cruelty, pelting him with stones until his feet bled, he did not curse them. Instead, he prayed for their guidance. When the angel offered to crush the city between mountains as punishment, he declined, hoping that one day their descendants would come to believe. That hope, born of compassion, eventually became reality. His forgiveness was not weakness. It was strength. The kind of strength that chooses healing over vengeance and peace over pride. He forgave those who had tried to kill him. When he returned to Makkah at the height of his power, victorious and surrounded by thousands of followers, those who had once plotted his death stood before him trembling. They feared retribution, but they found grace. He asked them, "What do you think I will do to you?" Their voices barely whispered, "Good, for you are a noble brother and the son of a noble brother." And he said, "Go, for you are free." In that moment, the hearts of those who once despised him were softened, not by force, but by mercy that defied every expectation. His compassion was not confined to moments of victory or public grandeur. It lived in the quiet, personal moments too. He would shorten his prayer if he heard a child crying, not wanting to cause distress to the mother. He would rise to greet his daughter Fatima and seat her beside him with affection, honoring her presence in front of others. He advised his followers to be gentle with their wives, to honor their servants, to visit the sick, to feed the hungry, and to treat even animals with kindness. Mercy was not a separate part of faith. To him, it was the heart of it. His treatment of animals revealed the depth of his sensitivity. He once entered a garden and saw a camel in distress. Its eyes were sunken, its body weak, and its heart burdened with pain. The prophet approached and stroked the animal gently, speaking soothingly to it. He rebuked its owner for neglecting it, reminding him that these creatures, though voiceless, are also part of God's creation and feel pain as humans do. On another occasion, he changed the path of an entire army to avoid disturbing a mother bird nesting with her chicks. His awareness was constant. No suffering escaped his notice. The prophet's mercy extended even to those society had abandoned. A woman who had committed adultery came to him, seeking punishment to purify herself. Though the law required a strict penalty, he did not rush to judgment. He asked her to return after giving birth. Months passed, and she returned with her child in her arms. He then asked her to return after weaning the child. More time passed. When she came back again, he finally carried out the judgment. But afterward, he prayed for her forgiveness and declared that her repentance was so sincere it could rival even the greatest acts of devotion. He reminded his followers not to condemn people without understanding the depths of their remorse, their journey, or their pain. Even when others around him were harsh or impatient, he remained calm. A man once pulled his cloak so violently that it left a mark on his neck. Instead of retaliating, the prophet simply turned to him with a composed face and asked what he wanted. When Bedouins came and behaved roughly, he was patient, knowing that their ways were different, but their hearts could still be guided. He did not react with pride or injury. His ego was never the center. He led with understanding, seeing ignorance as something to be cured with kindness, not punished with scorn. One of the most profound demonstrations of his mercy was in his supplications. Time and again, he prayed not for himself, but for others. He prayed for the guidance of those who mocked him. He wept for the believers yet to come, longing to meet those who would love him without ever seeing him. He referred to his followers as his brothers and sisters and asked for their forgiveness in his final prayers. On the day of judgment, when others will say, "Myself, myself," he will say, "My ummah, my ummah." His mercy does not end with this world. It is a bridge to the next. His life was a living embodiment of God's name, the most merciful. The Quran confirmed it, saying, "And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the worlds." That mercy was not abstract or poetic. It was felt in every corner of his life. It was in his smile to the stranger, his silence in the face of insult, his tenderness to the orphan, and his generosity to the poor. It was the thread that connected every act, every word, every breath. Mercy was not something he preached. It was who he was. Those who walked beside him, even for a short time, carried away the memory of that mercy. It changed them. It softened their hearts. It inspired them to become better. Long after he passed from this world, his compassion remained, echoing through generations, touching those who study his life with sincerity. His legacy is not only in the verses recited or the laws observed, but in the moments of gentleness we offer one another, the forgiveness we extend, the kindness we show even when it is difficult. In doing so, we draw nearer to the light he brought, a light born not of fire or fury, but of mercy without end. Throughout his life, Prophet Muhammad encountered moments that would shape not only his journey, but the very course of human history. These moments were not always grand in appearance, yet each carried with it the weight of divine purpose and human transformation. They were moments of deep sorrow, moments of miraculous ascension, moments of quiet diplomacy, and moments of farewell. In each of them, he responded not with pride or fear, but with the same unwavering trust in God and love for his people that had guided him from the beginning. One of the earliest and most trying periods came when the Quraysh tribe, alarmed by the growing influence of Islam, decided to isolate Muhammad and his followers completely. They imposed a harsh and merciless boycott, cutting off trade, marriage, and social ties with anyone who supported him. This was not merely political. It was a deliberate attempt to break the spirit of the believers through hunger, loneliness, and deprivation. For nearly 3 years, the Prophet and his companions were confined to a valley, surviving on sparse resources and enduring great hardship. Children cried from hunger, the elderly suffered in silence, and every day tested their resolve. Yet the Prophet did not complain or abandon his mission. He comforted his companions, reminded them of the reward for patience, and continued to pray for the hearts of his enemies to soften. Eventually, the boycott crumbled, not because of political pressure, but because of the growing conscience among the people who could no longer bear to see such injustice inflicted on those who had done no harm. In the midst of these trials came a night that would lift the Prophet's heart to realms unseen and beyond imagination. It was the miraculous night journey, known as Isra and Miraj. In a single night, he was carried from the sacred mosque in Makkah to the farthest mosque in Jerusalem, and from there ascended through the heavens. On this journey, he met the prophets who came before him, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and was brought to a closeness with the divine that no other human being had ever experienced. He was shown the wonders of paradise, the realities of the hereafter, and the signs of God's power in ways words could barely describe. From this journey came the gift of prayer, a direct connection between the believer and the Creator, established not as a burden, but as a mercy. When he returned to Makkah and shared this experience, many mocked him, unable to grasp the spiritual nature of the event. Yet those whose hearts were open found in his words a deeper truth, and the journey became a source of enduring strength and inspiration for generations to come. Among the many trials he faced was the loss of those dearest to him. In what came to be known as the Year of Sorrow, the prophet endured two devastating blows. First, his beloved wife Khadijah passed away. She had been his partner, his source of comfort, and the first to believe in his message. Her death left a silence in his home that even time could not fill. Soon after, his uncle Abu Talib, who had protected him from the hostility of the Quraysh, also passed away. With their absence, the prophet stood more vulnerable than ever, yet he continued his mission with courage. It was during this time that he traveled to the city of Taif, hoping to find a new home for the message of Islam. But the people there rejected him with such cruelty that they incited their children to throw stones at him until he bled. Even then, he did not curse them. He turned his face to the sky and pleaded not for revenge, but for their guidance. He hoped that, if not them, then their children might one day open their hearts to the truth. Years passed, and the tide began to turn. A group of people from Yathrib, soon to be called Medina, embraced the message of Islam and invited the prophet to lead them. With the permission of God, he left Makkah and made the migration, or hijrah, to Medina. This moment marked not only a physical relocation, but the beginning of a new chapter. In Medina, the Muslim community flourished. Bonds of brotherhood were established between the immigrants from Makkah and the helpers of Medina. A society rooted in justice, compassion, and mutual respect began to grow. Yet the challenges did not end. Battles would follow: Badr, Uhud, the Trench, each testing the faith and unity of the believers. In victory, the prophet remained humble. In defeat, he showed resilience and forgiveness. His leadership was never about dominance, but about lifting others, restoring dignity, and upholding truth. Perhaps one of the most profound moments in his life came not through battle, but through peace. When he and his companions set out for Makkah to perform the pilgrimage, they were stopped by the Quraysh at Hudaybiyah. A tense negotiation followed, and an agreement was reached that seemed, at first glance, to heavily favor the Quraysh. Many of the prophet's followers were disheartened. They had hoped for entry into the sacred city, and now they were being turned away. But the prophet accepted the terms with wisdom, recognizing that peace, however imperfect, was a door to greater victory. He saw beyond the moment, knowing that hearts could not be won by force, but only through time and truth. His trust was soon rewarded, as the treaty paved the way for a wave of conversions, and ultimately the peaceful opening of Makkah itself. When that day finally arrived and the prophet entered Makkah as a conqueror, there was no parade of revenge. There were no chains for his enemies, no torch of destruction in his hand. Instead, he entered with his head bowed in humility, declaring God's praise. He cleansed the Kaaba of its idols, restored its sanctity, and offered a general amnesty to the very people who had once sought his death. The city that had cast him out now stood in awe of his mercy. His return was not one of wrath, but of fulfillment. The words he had carried from the mountain cave had reached every corner of the land. As the years passed and the message spread, the prophet began to feel the approach of his journey's end. He performed the Hajj, the pilgrimage, and stood before a vast crowd of followers during the farewell sermon. His words were clear, heartfelt, and filled with love. He reminded the people of the sacredness of life, the equality of all humans, and the trust they now carried. He asked them to deliver the message to those who had not heard it, and then he turned his face to the heavens and said, "O God, have I delivered the message?" A chorus of voices answered, "Yes, you have." And with that, the final verses of Revelation descended, confirming that the mission was complete. Shortly after returning to Medina, he fell ill. His final days were spent in the home of his wife Aisha, where he continued to teach, to pray, and to express his love for his followers. His last words were not of power or regret, but of prayer, of guidance, and of longing to meet his Lord. When his soul departed, the earth wept, and the hearts of those who loved him shattered. Yet even in death, his example remained, illuminating the path for all who would follow. The life of the prophet was a tapestry woven with trials, triumphs, and transcendent moments. Each thread told a story of patience, courage, and unshakable faith. And through all of it, he remained a servant, a man who walked with the people, who wept with them, who carried their burdens and lifted their hopes. His life was not only lived in the presence of revelation, it was a living revelation itself, a light that continues to shine through the corridors of time. The teachings of Prophet Muhammad were like a lantern held high in the darkness, casting light not only upon grand matters of theology and worship, but also upon the quiet corners of everyday life. His words were never excessive or hollow. They were few, deliberate, and filled with wisdom that touched the heart as much as the intellect. Every saying carried with it a fragrance of truth, and even centuries later, that scent remains fresh, calming, and full of meaning. His speech did not aim to impress with complexity, but to reach with clarity. In his voice, there was gentleness. In his phrasing, there was beauty. In his guidance, there was always mercy. One of the most cherished aspects of his teachings is how they balance the seen and the unseen. He reminded his followers of the world beyond this one, of the hereafter and the presence of angels, of the scales of justice, and of the eternal life that follows death. Yet, at the same time, he gave importance to the mundane moments of life: how to eat, how to sleep, how to greet others, how to treat animals, and how to manage anger. His message was never distant or abstract. It was rooted in the soil of human experience. He offered guidance for kings and shepherds alike, for scholars and servants, for the powerful and the powerless. He taught that the best among people are those who are most beneficial to others. Goodness was not defined by titles or wealth, but by kindness, generosity, and service. To smile at another was a form of charity. To remove harm from a path was an act of faith. To visit the sick, to feed the hungry, to forgive the one who wronged you, these were signs of spiritual strength. His teachings constantly reminded the listener that real greatness lies in humility, and that every act of goodness, no matter how small, is known to God. His emphasis on intention was another hallmark of his wisdom. He said that every deed is judged by its intention, and that a person will be rewarded according to what they truly sought. This teaching reshaped the way people understood their actions. It meant that two people could perform the same outward deed, but one might be raised in reward and the other held back, depending on what lived in their heart. It was a call to sincerity, to purify one's purpose, to act not for praise or reputation, but solely for the pleasure of the Creator. When it came to relationships, his teachings were tender and deeply human. He advised men to treat their wives with kindness, and to remember that the best of men are those who are best to their families. He reminded women of their strength, their dignity, and their rights. He spoke of mothers as the most deserving of love, honor, and obedience, repeating the word mother 3 times before mentioning the father. His love for children was evident in the way he would play with them, carry them on his shoulders, and weep for their suffering. He even delayed sermons when he saw a child in need, placing the child's comfort before his own words. His approach was never rigid or cold. It was always rooted in compassion and connection. In community matters, he taught fairness and justice. He declared that no Arab is superior to a non-Arab, and no white person is superior to a black person, except by piety and good action. In a society shaped by tribal pride, these words were revolutionary. He reminded people that they came from the same origin, and that their true value lay not in their lineage, but in their character. He encouraged reconciliation between enemies, justice for the oppressed, and honesty in trade. Trust was a pillar of his teachings. He said that the one who cheats is not truly among his followers, and that breaking a promise was a sign of hypocrisy. His words were a moral compass, pointing always toward integrity and righteousness. In spiritual matters, he taught balance. He warned against excess and extremism. He advised people to pray, to fast, to give charity, and to remember God, but also to rest, to care for their bodies, and to find joy in life. He once told a companion who had vowed to spend every night in prayer and every day in fasting that he himself, the messenger of God, prayed and rested, fasted and broke fast, and that whoever turned away from his way was not truly following him. In this, he taught that spirituality should not be a burden, but a source of peace. It should flow through the rhythm of life, elevating it rather than escaping it. The Prophet often used simple metaphors to make profound truths easy to grasp. He said that the believer is like a date palm, firmly rooted, yet graceful, benefiting others with its shade and fruit. He said that the one who remembers God is like the living, while the one who forgets is like the dead. He spoke of the heart as a vessel that could be filled with light or darkened by sin, and of faith as something that increases and decreases based on one's actions and sincerity. These teachings were like seeds planted in the hearts of listeners, growing slowly into trees of understanding and action. His sayings about mercy were especially beautiful. He taught that God is more merciful to his servants than a mother is to her child. He said that those who show mercy to others will receive mercy from the most merciful. He urged people to be gentle, saying that whenever gentleness is found in something, it beautifies it, and whenever it is removed, it leaves things ugly. Even in matters of justice, he encouraged people to err on the side of kindness when possible. He told his followers to ease the burdens of others, to speak good or remain silent, and to always choose the path of peace when it was open. Among his most powerful teachings was his warning against arrogance. He said that no one who has even a speck of pride in their heart will enter paradise. He described the truly strong person not as the one who can overpower others, but as the one who controls themselves in anger. He taught that God looks not at outward appearances, but at hearts and deeds. These reminders cut through vanity and reminded believers of their true standing, not in the eyes of society, but in the sight of their Creator. Even his final sayings before his passing were filled with care. He reminded his followers to treat women well. He emphasized the importance of prayer, of holding fast to the Quran, of staying united. He did not leave behind wealth or material possessions, but he left a treasury of wisdom that continues to guide and inspire. His teachings were not locked in time. They live on, in the pages of sacred texts, in the memories of the faithful, and in the actions of those who try, day by day, to walk in his footsteps. To read his sayings is to hear the rhythm of a heart attuned to divine love. To follow his teachings is to discover that Islam is not merely a set of rules, but a way of being that elevates the soul and beautifies the world. His words are like drops of gentle rain falling on thirsty ground. Each one has the power to awaken something within, to soften, to heal, to remind, to uplift. Through his teachings and sayings, he did not merely inform people, he transformed them, and through them, he still transforms hearts today. There was a profound tenderness in the way the Prophet Muhammad regarded his people. His love for the Ummah was not an abstract idea or a vague emotion. It was a living, breathing force that guided his thoughts, his prayers, and his sacrifices every single day of his life. It poured from his heart like light from the sun, touching not just those who stood beside him, but those who would come long after him, those he never met with his eyes, but knew deeply in his soul. His love for the Ummah was vast and enduring, anchored not in personal gain or recognition, but in mercy and concern for their eternal well-being. From the earliest days of his mission, the Prophet's concern was not limited to conveying the message of Islam. He carried the burdens of the people who rejected it, the people who misunderstood it, and even those who harmed him because of it. He wept not out of weakness, but because his heart bore the weight of every soul lost in confusion or sin. He would stand in the stillness of the night, in prayer long after others had gone to sleep, whispering the names of his followers and asking for their forgiveness, for their protection, for their guidance. His feet would swell from standing, and when asked why he pushed himself so hard despite already being promised paradise, he simply replied that he wanted to be a grateful servant. He would often say that each prophet before him had been granted a prayer that would be accepted without fail, and while others used theirs in this world, he chose to save his for the day of judgment. And what would he use it for? Not for his own safety or comfort, not for status or power, but for his ummah. On that day, when every soul will tremble, when even the prophets will say, "Myself, myself," he will say, "My ummah, my ummah." His intercession will not be a moment of sudden compassion, but the natural outcome of a life spent loving and sacrificing for those who followed him, and even for those who never met him but carried his words in their hearts. Even in moments of joy and celebration, his thoughts would often return to the ummah. After victories in battle, when others would cheer and give thanks, he would bow in humility and pray for those who had suffered. He would visit the graves of his companions, tears in his eyes, praying for their peace. And in his final illness, when the nearness of death had become undeniable, his lips still moved in prayer. His voice still murmured concern for his people. He asked for them again and again, his soul preparing to leave this world while still clinging to the hope that his ummah would be protected and united. His love was not passive. It was a love that taught, that corrected, that warned, and that embraced. When someone made a mistake, he did not shame them. He guided them with patience. He never sought to punish his followers for their shortcomings, but instead opened a door for repentance, for mercy, for growth. When companions feared they had fallen too far, he reassured them that no sin was greater than God's forgiveness. He reminded them that as long as their hearts turned back to their Lord, hope would never be lost. This was the kind of love that healed, not by force, but by lifting the soul gently toward the light. He would weep for the martyrs, for the orphans, for the poor who had nothing to eat. He shared his food with the hungry, his clothing with those in need. He often gave away what little he had, even if it left him with nothing, and if someone asked for more, he would never refuse them. He would rather sleep on an empty stomach than see one of his followers in distress. His companions would sometimes try to shield him from hardship, but he refused to place his comfort above theirs. He lived among them, like them, with them, not as a distant figure of authority, but as a brother, a friend, a father to the ummah. In his final public address, the farewell sermon, his words rang with the fullness of this love. He reminded the people of their responsibilities to one another, of the sanctity of life, the equality of all believers, and the importance of justice and unity. He told them that he had fulfilled his duty, that the message had been delivered, and asked them to carry it forward. But even then, as the sermon came to a close, he turned his gaze to the heavens and asked his Lord again and again whether he had done enough. His concern was not for his own legacy, but for the future of those who would carry his message. Every moment, every word, every step was filled with love for those he had guided and those who would come after. When people today speak of him with love, when they recite his name with tears in their eyes, they are not simply honoring a historical figure. They are responding to a love that was already extended to them long before they were born. His du'as for the ummah were not bound by time. They were timeless, stretching across generations, across continents, into every home where his name is spoken with reverence. He saw beyond his own lifetime, beyond the dusty roads of Makkah and Medina, into the hearts of believers not yet created, and he cared for them as deeply as he did for those who sat beside him in the mosque. There are narrations that say the Prophet once sat among his companions and said with longing in his voice that he missed his brothers. They asked, "Are we not your brothers, O Messenger of God?" And he replied, "You are my companions. My brothers are those who will come after me and believe in me without having seen me." That statement, so simple and yet so profound, reveals the depth of his love. He spoke of a people who would follow his path without ever having heard his voice, who would believe in his message without ever having seen his face. And still, he called them his brothers and sisters. Still he wept for them. Still he prayed for them as if they were beside him in the present moment. His love was expansive, patient, and enduring. It welcomed the sinner, uplifted the poor, honored the women and the children, and never turned away a seeking heart. His love was rooted in the hope that every soul could find its way back to the Creator, and he was willing to carry the burdens of the Ummah to make that path easier. Even today, when believers hear his words, study his life, or shed a tear at the mention of his name, they are participating in a love that began with him and continues to flow through the veins of this faith. The Prophet's love for the Ummah was not a passing emotion, but a divine trust he carried with unwavering devotion. It shaped his nights, filled his days, and gave his every action deeper meaning. It was a love that endured rejection, pain, and sacrifice, yet never faltered. It was a love that gave birth to a community, nurtured it, guided it, and continues to protect it through the echoes of his example. And for all that he gave, all that he endured, all that he hoped for, his Ummah responds in kind, with love, with longing, with prayer, and with the enduring echo of peace and blessings sent upon him again and again as the sun rises and sets, as hearts awaken and remember. Did you know that the Prophet Muhammad would often sit among his companions in such a way that a stranger could not tell who among them was the leader? He never positioned himself above others, never demanded special treatment. His humility was as natural to him as breathing. When someone entered his gatherings, they would see a circle of equals, each person honored by his presence and his undivided attention. He used to mend his own clothes and repair his sandals. Despite being the most beloved of creation, he found no shame in manual tasks. In fact, he delighted in self-reliance and found beauty in simplicity. He never burdened others with tasks he could do himself, and he treated even the smallest chore with dignity. When children saw him, they would run to him, laughing and eager to be near. And he would lower himself to their level, sometimes even racing with them, lifting them into his arms, placing them on his shoulders. His love for children was pure, gentle, and free from formality. Their laughter brought him joy, and their tears stirred his heart. He would never raise his voice in anger, nor would he speak harshly. If he disapproved of something, he would remain silent or gently correct it with words so soft they left no wound. He was firm in truth, but always wrapped it in mercy, never humiliating others, never exposing their faults in public. The Prophet had a way of making each person feel like the most important one in the room. When he spoke to someone, he turned his whole body toward them, looked them in the eyes, and listened without interruption. No matter how many people surrounded him, he gave every individual his full presence, his full respect. He loved the scent of musk and often wore perfume. He said that fragrance is a gift not to be refused, and he appreciated its uplifting nature. His companions would describe his scent as lingering, even after he had left the room, like a memory that stayed behind, warm and soothing. When he would lead prayer, he kept it short out of concern for the elderly, the sick, or those who had work to return to. He knew the hearts of the people and tailored his leadership with compassion. Yet in his private prayers, he would stand long into the night, weeping softly as he recited verses, pouring his heart out in whispered supplication. He taught that the strong one is not the one who can wrestle another to the ground, but the one who can control his anger when provoked. And he lived that teaching daily, showing restraint even in the face of hostility, answering cruelty with calmness, and never allowing emotion to overpower truth. The prophet would never eat while leaning back or reclining. He preferred to sit humbly, close to the ground, and eat with gratitude. He never criticized food, no matter how simple. If he liked it, he ate it. If he did not, he simply left it without complaint. Every bite was taken with the remembrance of God. He taught that smiling in the face of your brother is a charity. That even the smallest acts, a kind word, a helping hand, a moment of patience, could weigh heavily on the scale of good deeds. To him, nothing was too small to matter, no act too ordinary to be filled with meaning. When an old woman once swept the mosque and then passed away quietly, the prophet noticed her absence. He asked about her, and upon hearing of her death, he was saddened that he had not been told. He immediately went to her grave and prayed for her, honoring her quiet contribution with his heartfelt prayers. He cared for animals deeply. Once, he saw a camel overworked and underfed, and his eyes filled with tears. He gently placed his hand on the animal and spoke kind words, then turned to its owner and reminded him that animals too feel hunger, thirst, and pain. His mercy extended to all living beings. He used to call people by the names they loved most and often gave affectionate nicknames to those around him. He would never call someone by a name that hurt or embarrassed them. His speech uplifted, healed, and built bridges where others might have drawn lines. He was once gifted a cloak and wore it briefly, then gave it away to someone who admired it. Generosity for him was a reflex, not a decision. His heart found joy in giving, and he never feared poverty from sharing what he had. He knew that giving never decreased wealth, and that what is given for the sake of love returns in ways unseen. He taught that God is more merciful to his servants than a mother to her child. And when he spoke of mercy, his voice would soften, his eyes sometimes moistening, because he felt its weight and truth so deeply. It wasn't merely a concept to him, it was a living force he carried in every interaction. The prophet would visit the sick regularly, even if they were of different faiths. He would sit beside them, hold their hand, offer comforting words, and remind them of hope and healing. He taught that visiting the ill brings peace not only to the patient, but to the visitor as well. He once said that a prostitute was forgiven by God because she gave water to a thirsty dog, and another woman was condemned for starving a cat. Through these stories, he showed that compassion and cruelty, even in the smallest matters, have cosmic consequences. Every life matters, and every action ripples beyond what we see. When his companions asked him how they could increase their faith, he told them to keep their tongues moist with the remembrance of God. He taught that peace enters the heart not through noise or argument, but through quiet connection with the divine, through whispered praise and gentle prayer. He never interrupted someone speaking unless it was to stop harm. He waited, listened, and responded with thoughtfulness. He believed that everyone deserved to be heard, and that silence could carry more wisdom than words when chosen with care. He loved rain. When it began to fall, he would expose part of his garment to it, letting the drops touch his skin. He said it had just come from his Lord. He found beauty in the signs of nature, saw messages in the clouds, the trees, the stars, and taught others to reflect upon them with wonder and gratitude. When he saw someone feeling low, he would console them, placing a hand on their shoulder, offering words that lifted their spirit. He never minimized their pain, but gently guided them toward hope. His presence alone was often enough to soothe a troubled heart. He once said that the entire earth has been made a place of worship. Wherever you are, you can turn to God. You do not need walls, towers, or rituals to find him. Just sincerity, humility, and a heart willing to reach out. He lived with little, slept on a mat that left marks on his back, and declined the riches offered to him. He chose instead the life of the poor, walking with them, eating with them, and reminding others that true richness is not in possessions but in the soul. The prophet said that hearts become rusty like iron, and that they can be polished with the remembrance of God and the recitation of the Quran. He believed in the healing power of spiritual reflection, in the gentle renewal of a weary heart through soft remembrance and still moments. Even in laughter, he was measured. He smiled often, but his laughter was never loud or excessive. It came from a place of lightness, not mockery. It brought comfort, not discomfort. It was the laughter of someone who saw the beauty and the brevity of life, and chose to carry both with grace. Each of these gentle facts is a thread in the rich fabric of a life lived with purpose, tenderness, and unwavering love. In remembering them, in reflecting upon their meaning, hearts find quiet and rest, carried gently into peace by the one who was sent as a mercy to all worlds. As the gentle echo of these reflections begins to fade into the quiet corners of your heart, a stillness settles over the story we've walked through together. The life of Prophet Muhammad was not simply a collection of events or teachings. It was a living, breathing testament to mercy, truth, and unwavering love. Each moment of his journey carried weight, yet moved with the softness of compassion. He was a man who lived among people, feeling their joys, their sorrows, their hopes and fears, and offering to each of them something of himself, whether it was a word of kindness, a prayer whispered in solitude, or a moment of silent understanding. In a world often burdened by noise and conflict, his presence was a sanctuary of gentleness. He taught not only by command, but by quiet example. He lived the values he preached: honesty without cruelty, humility without weakness, and leadership without arrogance. His character was never separate from his message. It was the vessel through which the divine was expressed in human form. He did not speak to impress, but to reach the soul. And those who heard him, who looked into his eyes, knew that they were in the presence of something profoundly rare, a soul fully surrendered to its creator, and yet deeply connected to every other living being. His legacy lives on not in monuments or statues, but in the warmth of a smile offered to a stranger, in the act of holding back anger when you have the power to harm, in the decision to forgive when vengeance would be easier. It lives on in the gentleness shown to a child, in the care extended to the elderly, in the compassion felt even toward animals. Every action rooted in love and mercy echoes something of his way. Though centuries have passed since his footsteps graced the earth, his light remains. It glows in the hearts of those who love him, in the prayers whispered by millions across the globe, in the verses recited with awe and longing. That light cannot be dimmed by time. It is not bound by history. It flows through every act of sincerity, every moment of truth, every gesture of goodness inspired by his example. And perhaps what makes his life so unforgettable is not only his message, but the way he cared. Even in his final breaths, his concern was not for himself, but for his people, for those who believed and those who had yet to believe. He spoke of us long before we spoke of him. He prayed for us long before we knew his name. His heart beat not just for the companions who walked beside him, but for every soul who would one day try to follow his path. To know that is to feel the depth of his love, a love that stretches beyond time, across distance, straight into the heart of anyone willing to receive it. So as we bring this journey to a close, hold on to that love. Let it soften the sharp edges of your days. Let it guide your choices, heal your wounds, and draw you closer to the peace he embodied. You are part of the ummah he prayed for, part of the vision he carried with such care. And in your smallest moments of kindness, your quiet prayers, your efforts to do good even when unseen, his legacy lives on through you. May peace and blessings forever be upon him, the one who taught us how to walk gently, speak truthfully, and live meaningfully. and may your heart carry his light with tenderness wherever you go.